Hello and welcome to Matt and Brodie's yet untitled sports podcast, where we will take a look at all things important and those things not so important as well from the wild week that was around the sporting globe. In AFL, a giant effort saw GWS book a date with Richmond at the ever-neutral MCG for a prelim final, and Geelong broke a historical hoodoo as a shocking Sydney stumble saw the side surprisingly sing their swan song. A bit of trade talk as well, as the package may find himself delivered to Windy Hill. Some ramble for you as well, as the masterful Matildas made their mark. Some champion performances kicked off this season's Champions League. Man City continued their rampant scoring ways, and Barca kicked some arser. All this and more as we enjoy a nice chit-chat about all that's been in this week of ball kicking. I am Brodie Cowburn, and joining me for that chit-chat is my co-host. Highly rated, always opinionated, never imitated, and given Melbourne a dead and buried this year, hopefully unbiased and equally weighted, it's Matthew Evans.
Oh, jeez. Wow.
How was that? We've been working on that. Was that worth it?
You can tell folks that he's worked tirelessly on that. If you think that Jake Stringer is going to Essendon, you've got another thing coming to you. He is not going to Essendon. But, Brodie, thank you for having me. It's great to be here when we're recording live from Narre Warren. It's Narre Warren South, to be more specific, and it's
the
really
cultural heartland of Melbourne.
Well, actually, I haven't been out to Narre Warren. I have been out to Casey.
Yeah, the Casey
to watch
Fields.
the Casey Fields, to see the not only the Casey Scorpions when they were the Scorpions,
Melbourne Women's as well,
but also the AFLW
Yes.
earlier this year. So I'm sort of getting to know these parts. But
yeah, well, welcome. It's
great to be here. Good to see you in the QPR.
Yes, we're rocking the Queen's Park Rangers, I believe 13-14 Guernsey today. You
There
want
we
to show
go.
us what you're wearing, Matthew?
Yeah, well, I'm going with the Villa last season's kit, actually, Under Armour. But Villa had a win against Barnsley, 3-0
Right.
away. The potato face got his victory. That he was. that they were saying we're threatening. Wewe're threatening. Absolutely.
Threatening, right.
But
that's a big word.
no,
to
absolutely
describe us
happy,
in Villa.
absolutely wrapped that Villa got the chocolates over the weekend. It's about time, because they've been drawing a hell of a lot. They got it to a similar start to this season like they did last season with De Matteo. So yeah, no, very happy. But we've got a lot of sport to get through, Brodie, don't we?
Yes,
a lot of sport.
It's been an absolutely huge week, and well, I suppose to kick it all off, we have to talk about the AFL. Well, the biggest thing, of course, was the prelim. The semi-finals.
Semi-finals
we're
football,
calling them.
fantastic.
GWS versus West Coast and Geelong versus Sydney. Now, we'll start with GWS versus West Coast. The Giants really showing a side they haven't shown for a few weeks. What happened and why were they so good? Because I don't think anyone really saw them being as good as they were against the Eagles.
Well, one man, Stevie J.
Yeah.
This is why you play Stevie J in finals. I mean,
Matthew, I hate to say I told you so, but I mean...
well,
I had the audio
I
from a few weeks
had
ago.
no problem. But I had no problem with Stevie J playing. It was more of a case of if he was fit enough. And, as it turned out, that scratch match that they played on Friday, he'd played really well and obviously warranted his return to the side. And what a better way to say, I am your man, by kicking 6 goals. It doesn't happen often in a game of footy. So, no, Stevie J really tore that game straight. And the Giants were all over West Coast. I mean, West Coast did, okay to get to the finals. They had they came off a really intense victory, and you sort of saw that was going to happen. And you would expect the Giants to get over the line. But the thing I've noticed is that the finals trends have restored to normality. The top 4 sides are playing in the prelims.
Yeah, and that's quite a surprise because, I mean, you look last year with the Western Bulldogs, I think everyone expected Sydney to be that side this year, and a lot of people were expecting West Coast to get up against GWS. It's just that they've been so uninspiring over the past, probably half a season. They've only had a couple of real standout performances, but they were so excellent, and Steve Johnson kicked 4 goals in a quarter, which is something that is done very, very rarely, especially in finals. I mean, Lance Franklin did it last week against Essendon, but maybe the less said about that, the better.
Yep.
But just, especially from someone who was written off a couple of weeks ago as being dead and buried, done, played his final game, see you later, been nice knowing you, Stevie J, he was outstanding. He was so good. And he kicked those 6 goals from not a lot of opportunities as well. He wasn't kicking, he was kicking accurately, and he was making the most of every time he had the ball. Steve Johnson is a freak of nature.
And he only had the 12 disposals as well. But, and what made the win more impressive is they didn't have their top ruckman, Shane Mumford, and also
Jeremy Cameron missing
who
as well.
arguably one of the best forwards in the competition.
More than arguably, I think it's
I think
pretty objective.
I would just say top 3, perhaps. top 3 might be interesting. Call.
And also worth noting that Cameron was out, and one of GWS's players who wasn't firing for their semi-final was Jonathan Patton, who wasn't actually that great. He created a few opportunities, but his kicking was wayward. He looked very, very nervous.
But I do like Jonathan Patton.
Jonathan Patton, yes.
You get always the big forward line with all the J's.
Get your J's mixed up, aren't you? Stevie J's, Jeremy, Jonathan.
But no, the Giants are very good, and I do like Patton. I really rate him. I think he'll play an important role next week against Richmond. We'll see how we go there. But no, it would be really interesting to see. It's really good to see that the Giants are sort of getting there. It shapes up to be a really good round, and we'll get to the Adelaide Geelong game. But I tell you, 2 really interesting prelim finals for this reason only. Brett Deledio is going to play against the Tigers, and Patrick Dangerfield is going to play against the Adelaide Crows. This season has just been unprecedented. It has been ridiculous. It doesn't happen. It has things that have never happened have happened.
It's been a scriptwriter's dream, really, and I think that with match quality in these finals so far being pretty subpar, except for one exceptional game between West Coast and Port Adelaide. It's really been made up for in the stories that have been found. Richmond being so outstanding, GWS performing in the wake of a host of many, many, many injuries. I was very impressed by them. There were some other talking points from the GWS West Coast game as well. We've talked about the Giants. If we have a look at the Eagles, the question has to be raised. Did they need to take a risk and maybe just bring in Nick Naitanui for this game? I don't think they could have done anything at all.
I don't think it made a difference because you can see where GWS won it and they ran it around the engine room. And maybe Naitanui would have had an impact, but
that's the thing with Mumford out and their ruck stock's depleted. Obviously, Rory Lobb was good, but
also the Giants forward line I thought was too dynamic for West Coast. I mean, West Coast were pretty resolute. You can compare Port Adelaide's forward line. You have Dixon, Wingard, and Robbie Gray when he goes forward. But in the GWS Giants, okay, so you had Patton, you had Lobb. Lobb is the tallest player on the ground, over 200 centimetres. Hard to take a contested mark against him. And you've got dynamic small forwards in Toby Green, and as it was demonstrated, Stevie J. I mean, I just reckon West Coast were overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed, yeah.
They were underwhelming, West Coast. They were underwhelming.
There we go. Fix it up.
But yeah, I think it was just a case of the Giants were too good. They're flexing their muscle at the right time. And, given that they had the injuries during the year, it will be interesting to see. But another interesting point to come out of that game, before we move on to Adelaide and Geelong and other sporting, we'll talk about the Matildas in a sec. But it was interesting, made on the ABC radio this morning, that the crowd for the friendly, by the way, nothing on the line, between Australia, the Matildas, and Brazil drew a greater crowd out at Penrith than the GWS Giants West Coast Eagles semi-final at Spotless. Now, I know that that the thing that the AFL would have been competing against was not a friendly, but they would be competing with NRL finals. What did you make of the finals attendance?
Well, it's the lowest finals attendance, here's the figure, since 1916.
That's a stat and a half.
That is a stat and a half, and that's pretty it looks pretty bad for the AFL, especially because they had such a great week last week in terms of attendances. You had the Sydney-Essendon game sold out. You had Richmond versus Geelong sold out. Port Adelaide at Adelaide Oval was packed to capacity as well. I just do not... What else have people got to do in Western Sydney on a Friday night?
Why
aren't they coming to watch? I mean, I suppose it's a rugby state, I know, but you'd think with a young, exciting side that played so well that it would be about time that the public starts getting behind them, and their attendance was appalling.
I think it goes back to the attitude of the AFL. Like, many people forget that it was Andrew Demetrio who said that when building and redeveloping the showgrounds out there, which is now Spotless Stadium, they said that they were only expecting the GWS crowds to be, or a membership base to be around a 20-something thousand. I don't think that's good enough.
No.
That means
And they didn't even achieve that.
You're capping expectation. And,
Yeah.
they'll get to a point where, if this GWS Giants side is really successful, I mean, it goes back to why the Brisbane Lions attendance goes up and down. People can say that the Brisbane Lions haven't been good for the last few years, and that's absolutely fair. But when the Brisbane Lions were thereabouts, more people were going to their games because the Brisbane Broncos were playing terribly, and so were the Queensland Reds at the period. So in Queensland, you have a situation where whoever's the best team, you go and see them, and despite the fact that the GWS Giants, again in a rugby state, they might be one of the best teams, but they've also got another few teams that are doing well. I mean, except for Parramatta, who of course went out in straight sets. That was not good. In a bit of NRL news, but look, I think it's a bit of a problem for the AFL.
Well,
unless the crowds don't, if they don't improve next year, then I think it becomes a bit of a problem, because how much money does the AFL keep putting into GWS?
It's so frustrating as well, because they've had not the year they were expected to have, but they're still doing very well on the field. And you said their expectation was 20,000. They didn't even reach that for a game to get into a preliminary final. There's some real worrying things there, and I wonder almost if, because on-field success can hardly be the issue, given they were very good last year, and they've been good again this year, and they'll probably be very good again next year, the year after, and the year after that, unless something goes horribly, horribly wrong. Maybe, if we have a look at AFL competition, maybe it'll just take Sydney becoming very, very bad for some supporters to jump ship, because they've kind of come in at an awkward time where Sydney have been so dominant over the last 10 years. They've never really done that bottoming out thing that some other clubs have done. They've been consistently successful. They won a premiership in 2005. They won a premiership in 2012. They've been in finals pretty much every year, maybe every year for the last decade.
Yeah. Absolutely, and they've done incredibly well to get from 0-6 to make this year's final.
If you're a fan in Sydney, why would you switch or choose GWS to start with? Unless you lived right in that area.
Exactly, and the other thing that the GWS Giants probably need to start considering as their main competition is, of course, the Western Sydney Wanderers, because you go to they're developing Parramatta Stadium specifically because of because of Western Sydney.
They're a huge success story. It shows that sports expansion in Western Sydney is viable.
But you just got to.
That club has the best atmosphere out of all the clubs in the A-League, but you don't really see. The most atmosphere you get at the GWS game is that little bloke with the horn every time they scored a goal playing the Game of Thrones theme.
Oh, there you go. That's the epitome of sports entertainment in Western Sydney in terms of the AFL. But anyway,
we'll move on.
We'll move on.
GWS are very impressive on the field.
Yes, I agree.
And they could be a lot of trouble for Richmond next week. But before we talk about that game, we'll move on to the game that has happened, and we can do a little review before we move on to the previews. Geelong versus Sydney. Now, this was a huge role reversal from last week.
Yeah.
Something that I don't think anyone was expecting. Geelong was so poor against Richmond, and Sydney was so excellent. So it was so strange to see this happen. I don't think anyone saw it coming. What did you make of it?
Well, you could tell that Geelong were on in the first quarter, and we were all watching it, and you knew something was up when Dangerfield started in the goal square.
Played there the whole game as well, playing out of full
virtually
forward, essentially.
Played all the game. I think he played in patches in the third quarter.
So predominantly playing out of the goal square, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. So it was really interesting. Whilst Dangerfield kicked 4 first half goals and Hawkins basically did nothing all game except kick a consolation at the end. I actually, I'll say something a bit controversial. I reckon there were a few decisions from the umpires that they were pretty nervous, I must say. There was the chopping of the arms on Dangerfield, which a lot of people would say that's not a free kick, and they decided to pay that. And
he received a couple of free kicks in that first
and there was also
Dangerfield that were a bit untoward.
And there's also, and without umpiring bashing, I'm not into umpiring bashing, but the other obvious decision that shouldn't have been paid was the Franklin 50 metres. Now, luckily that turned into a behind, and they didn't make the most of it. But that was it was a goal actually.
Right.
But some of the decisions, Geelong got it early. But having said that, Geelong just got the better of Sydney. They were just manic around the footy, and nothing epitomised how good Geelong were was that second and third, fourth effort from, what was it?
Yes, I know exactly. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Lost possession of the ball
Yeah.
and chased it up with a really great tackle kind of towards the half-forward line. I know exactly what moment you're talking about.
I forgot his last name. I forgot his first name. His last name is Stewart. I think it's Caden Stewart.
I also believe...
From Barwon, South Barwon.
I also believe he's injured.
No, he's been cleared of any serious injury.
He's been cleared, all right. Well,
cleared of serious injury.
I've been given false information.
That's good news for Geelong fans. Although he could probably go for the fitness test, but he's been in incredible mature age, first year AFL player, and he's done spectacularly well.
We talk about that first year AFL player. We look at the other side of the spectrum. One of the elder statesmen of the game who was so impressive was Harry Taylor, I thought, who was given a big job. Tom Lonergan fell out of the side due to illness with food poisoning.
Of all things.
He's going to regret having a dodgy curry the day before a huge semi-final.
Who eats curry before it?
He's gone out of the side. Harry Taylor's come in, has played forward for the entirety of the year, essentially, or at least for the back end.
Yeah.
He's walked straight up into the defence, played on Lance Franklin, and has completely and utterly shut him down and
he's a
nullified him as a threat.
Yeah, he's a champion player, and and he was speaking about how quick he had to be prepared, and he found out the night before that there might be a possibility that Tom wasn't going to play because he was unwell. But I think credit to Harry Taylor, he's a class act, and there were so many stars that stood up for Geelong. Obviously, Selwood also was very good. Menegola. As well, Menzel, who was the inclusion as well, and for a player that's been maligned a lot for Geelong this year, Stephen Motlop, he did some really good things. Still could
at his best, he's very good, Stephen Motlop.
Oh yeah, and
his worst,
but I mean, let's talk about the worst, because you talk about players that when they're at their worst, they're at their absolute worst, and one of those it was who he tackled. Gary Rowan, he went missing. Franklin had that corky obviously affected him.
You're welcome for that, by the way, Geelong.
Kennedy, Parker, Hanbury. I mean, Jack did a couple of good things. Heath Grundy was okay, and there were some Sydney, and of course, Rampy and Sam Lloyd were underwhelmed with Dangerfield early on. So, the momentum was really set early. But it was just a really dirty night for the Swans, and again, a lot of us aren't surprised, because to come from 0-6 and to win pretty much all those games. But
Sydney are just a bad 0-7 side without that pesky 14-2 run in the middle.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, pretty much. But you know how taxing the game is when you have to put in those performances. Like, they were the most informed side going to the finals, but there had to be a point where they ran out of steam, and unfortunately it was in a semi-final. But hey, they'll be bigger and better for next year. They'll understand that they have to win games early on. There's a few clubs that need to win games consistently early on and set up their seasons. But another thing worth mentioning, it was Jared McVeigh's 300th game, which is
champion of the game, Jared McVeigh.
Yeah. And I thought he played quite well. No one from Sydney played
wouldn't have had any problems with Jared McVeigh's performance. You'd think he would be good for another year or two. He's one of the real stars of the game. One of the real underappreciated. I mean, it's hard to say underappreciated when he has been revered for the most part of his career.
And also played 300 games, and he's a premiership co-captain. He's an incredible player. But the Sydney Swans will be bigger and better next year.
So I believe that my conspiracy theory is that Geelong are playing a little game of 7D chess here, and what they've done is, because they know they play very badly after a bye, they played horribly against Richmond, to catfish Sydney into playing not to their full potential.
Are you suggesting?
And they've surprised them. They've avoided the dreaded bye.
Are you using a word starting with T and ending with anking?
I'm not saying. I'm just.
Actually, I have a theory about tanking. I have a theory about tanking. This might be a conspiracy for Melbourne.
I was going to say, a Melbourne fan with a theory about tanking. Surely not.
Well, the AFL says we were not guilty, so fine.
They fined you
$500,000. Go figure. It's anyway.
It's okay. It's
Adelaide tanked against West Coast in round 23.
Right, you think?
Possibly
to knock Melbourne out of the finals.
Who knows?
I don't know if they see Melbourne as that much of a threat, in all honesty, but
I think
Maybe that's just me.
Melbourne, can be consistently great or consistently.
I would have thought it would go the other way around.
The divide is
hard for
few and far between. Yes.
They would try extra hard for their champion, Simon Goodwin, but who knows? Maybe I'm not quite correct. But anyway,
Indeed.
I think that we're just about done with the games that happened this week.
Well, you know what they say, Brody. Instead of we can look at the past, but we always got to look to the future. And next week, prelim finals. Exciting.
Some blockbusters. We got Richmond versus GWS at the MCG. This is going to be a far cry from the attendance last week for GWS. I tell you what, they played in front of 15,000, somewhat.
I reckon you'll get the same crowd at Geelong Richmond. You'll get 95,000. You'll get 92,000 Richmond supporters in about
generous for GWS. 3,000. I don't know about that. A couple hundred.
They're possibly capable of travelling.
Sprinkled across the grounds. Being very, very
good
quiet.
News for me and the members, because I don't think there's many Richmond supporters in the members. I'll be able to get in the members. That'll be fine. That'll be great.
I have to go about getting my tickets for that somehow, so I can support my young Richmond supporter brother through thick and thin. Either celebrate with him if the night goes to plan, or if not, could be a very long train ride home.
Imagine how hollow the MCG would be if GWS beat Richmond.
It will be.
How funny would that? No, it's not funny.
No. Well, let's say it's funny. It's pretty funny.
I've got a few Richmond supporters that are hopefully listening to the podcast, but
it should be an absolutely massive matchup. There's lots of talking points, of course. Brett Deledio coming back to face his former club.
Absolutely.
I mean, Brett Deledio left last season chasing success and premiership glory from Richmond. Everyone thought, fair enough. And Richmond have come out and been better than GWS this year and could very well beat them on the weekends.
And in that context, it's such a pivotal game because obviously, and it's the same with Dangerfield. I mean, obviously Dangerfield went to Geelong to settle down his fan, but I think he also wanted to win a premiership. And you could almost argue, there are pivotal moments in time, and obviously, things would play out differently if Deledio had stayed. Having said that, the same thing with Dangerfield.
If Deledio had stayed, maybe we wouldn't have seen Richmond have generated enough to bring in Josh Caddy, or maybe even Dion Prestia. They might not have got that deal done, but Josh Caddy Nankervis as well. But Josh Caddy,
Nank the Tank.
Josh Caddy is the big one. They wouldn't have brought him in, and I think he's been really good for them this year, playing a lot of time in the forward line, helping to kind of, get that pretty small forward line working to the success that it has been working. So I think that it's pretty much been a win for Richmond seeing Brett Deledio go, because they've been so fantastic this year. But you do have to feel for him if Richmond get up against GWS, don't you?
Because I do. I do feel for him, but again, it's the nature of the industry, and if you start feeling sorry for people, then you undermine, what the game's all about. There are winners and losers. There's nothing you can show about that. I mean, I said it on Friday night watching the Sydney Swans game. I mean, how sad is it that Zach Jones is playing more finals than his brother Nathan? I mean, but you think about some of the greatest players. I had
no idea that.
You think about I can reflect on a Melbourne. I can reflect on a Melbourne spot. Like the greatest, arguably one of the greatest ever players to play for Melbourne, never played in a premiership. In Robert Flower. And but hey. I mean, good on if GWS win, but Deledio gets to play in a grand final. Having said that, it's you make decisions, and it'll be the same. It would have. You think Ryan Griffin would have felt the same. Last year about the Western Bulldogs. Callan Ward might have had a little bit of that feeling, particularly to be knocked out in that prelim. So the question will be whether GWS have learnt the lesson from last year. Are they ready to make the next step? Yes, we won't have Mumford, they won't have Cameron. They will have some of their really good players, and they would have a pretty strong squad. Taranto played well in that scratch game, so he could play. So we don't know what will happen. We'll have to wait and see. But it's a case for GWS if they can learn the lessons from last year, and if it's up to Richmond if they can handle the hype.
Yeah, and I mean, it just really depends. You don't know which GWS is going to turn up, really, do you? But if they play like they did last week, it should be an absolutely cracking game, because you got Richmond, who are one of the form team of the competition. It's really setting itself up to be, after a pretty below standard final series so far, to be that game that really blows everyone away.
Yeah.
It really could be excellent. Fast-paced football, young players, exciting, should be quite good. Also noticed as well, Richmond are through to the VFL Grand Final this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely.
We could get the old 1-2 punch of Richmond supporters eliminated in the preliminary final and losing a VFL Grand Final.
That's 3 weeks of quarantine almost.
Get the Sultan.
Rub it
in the wounds.
Of 7 p.m. curfews because Richmond supporters are raiding Melbourne.
Punt Road will be torn down. Stands will be up in flames.
Here's something for the listeners and the viewers on the. We've got the phone out. That's great. I like that. We're recording, so you can have a look at this on YouTube as well. Do you reckon it would be worse if Richmond won the AFL Grand Final than, say, Collingwood winning a Grand Final? Everyone have to vacate to Noosa. There's still some snow on the slopes, so everyone knows where the Melbourne supporters are going.
Look, I mean, I want Richmond to win. I'm rooting for them over the next few weeks. So I think they've gone through a lot of tough times. So I'm going to give them. I'm going to say they're allowed to get a little out of control for a little bit. Where we just say make sure they rein it in by mid-December. We'll give them mid-December. They can rein it in by then, and then we'll be okay. We'll give it until then. They can have their fun.
Enough. No, they'll be carrying on all the way through summer.
Jonathan Patton versus Alex Rance. Good matchup.
Going to be a great matchup.
Should be fun to watch. I'm looking forward to this game.
I'll tell you what, if Richmond were... If GWS were any smart, I would play a pretty tall forward line. Mm-hmm. I'd play tall forward line.
You play a tall forward line?
Yeah.
Well, Richmond are
because
obviously famous for not having a tall forward line.
Obviously, so. Rance can't cope with it all. Rance would have more of a problem with Lob, because Lob has superb reach. But, I mean, Patton just needs to do what Charlie Dixon did, except, kick straight, obviously. But Jonathan Patton just needs to have a big impact in the first quarter. And once he's on, he's on. It'll be the same for Hawkins. It'll be the same for most key forwards. So it will be an interesting matchup. I'm looking forward to seeing this game. I actually probably would be more interested to see how this game plays out. Because I sort of know, and we'll get to it now. I know what we're going to get from the Adelaide Geelong game. We're going to get a fierce contest. It will be tight and it will be determined within a goal. So
maybe we shall move on to Adelaide and Geelong, of course. The other big game being played at Adelaide Oval. I believe that's the Friday night game, actually.
Yes.
Sorry, probably should have opened with that, but we've decided to mix things up a little bit here.
Friday night football at the Adelaide Oval.
Patrick Dangerfield up against the old club, the old faithful.
Josh Jenkins during the week. How funny.
Former Essendon man,
I'll tell you what, there's one thing that we're journalism students, as everybody knows, and the thing that...
I didn't know that.
Oh, didn't you really?
I wasn't aware.
Oh, well. You learn something new every day, don't you, Brody? You do. Anyway, so that's Josh Jenkins, and there's a bit of banter. They know each other. I
haven't seen this. What's he done?
There's just all this banter, and Josh Jenkins has come out and said it's like, or before Geelong beat Sydney, it's like, Geelong have to get to play Adelaide first. And then, ripped into Dangerfield about he could have been a Brownlow medalist and a premiership player. And I thought,
wow.
I don't mind this. But you get so many people in the media to say, I shouldn't be saying this. Adelaide haven't even made this. We're all becoming too outraged.
Oh, you think so?
Yes, we are.
Well, I like it when footballers show a little bit of personality.
I do.
Especially because Patrick Dangerfield, he dishes it out. He's writing articles in the Herald Sun, badmouthing Adelaide and making cheeky little snide comments. If he wants to dish it out, he can take it in.
Yes, absolutely. And Josh, and again, before we carry on, it is banter. They do know each other very well.
No, you would think so.
Oh, they do.
They're
good
buds.
Friends.
Yes,
they're good
so
pals.
It's all.
You can't be enemies forever.
No,
surely not.
But it should be a very entertaining matchup.
Yeah.
It should be another one. Well, we've said this about every game. It should be a fantastic game, but if Geelong play like they did last week again, it should be a fantastic game. But who knows if they will or not? If they play like they did against Richmond, it'll be a blowout because Adelaide have the ability to score and score quickly. And when they do, they're dangerous and very scary.
You don't know. You just simply don't know in finals, and that's what makes it interesting. But I'll put a question to you, Brody. Given that Dangerfield did go forward against Sydney Swans, obviously it was a tactical move because you had to send Harry Taylor back to play on Franklin, and you may as well. And you had Scott Selwood in the midfield as well. Do you think that Geelong start Dangerfield, Chris Scott starts Dangerfield in the centre? Because I think where this game will be won,
question, isn't it? Yeah.
Because you have Selwood and Dangerfield as well as the Selwoods and Dangerfield as well as Menegola who goes through and Darcy Lang who went through. I don't know if he'll play, but anyway. you have a lot of the midfield, but then you're going up against the Adelaide Crows midfield in
Sloan,
Rory
the
Sloan,
Crouches.
yeah, and absolutely Rory Laird when he goes through. Where do you think Dangerfield should start?
That's a real good question, isn't it? I mean, with Adelaide being such a fast-scoring side, and of course their forward stocks have potentially been depleted a little bit for this game. We'll talk about that in a second. If you put him up forward, I mean, he scored 4 goals, I think, was it? In the last final. So I think that it's important that they have that sort of goal-scoring prowess. And we've seen Tom Hawkins in recent weeks has been pushing up the ground a little more, hasn't been scoring as many goals, but he's been contributing more to the play. Maybe you do have to start Patrick Dangerfield on the forward line again. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's where they started him last week against Sydney, and they played the best they have for a little while. So.
You see, the thing is, it is interesting because my view is I would start Dangerfield in the midfield. Right. Because I just think it really, from a structural point of view, in the matchups between Geelong and Sydney, it really did work for Dangerfield to go forward because I don't think the Sydney Swans defence is not a particularly tall defence. It's a particularly mobile defence and a very good, defensive running off half back sort of defence. But you think about Adelaide, I mean, Daniel Talia, All-Australian, and also Alex Keith if he plays.
Did Talia come back in? Because I remember him being injured at a certain point.
He came back in.
He came back in. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean the only defender that won't be in there is Brodie Smith who tore his ACL in that game against the GWS. But I think I would start Dangerfield forward, and obviously Hawkins will go against Talia, and there's a few other defenders that have just escaped my mind. I usually know the Adelaide Crows players really well, but
your mind's failing you today.
Yes, I've getting over the fact that Villa have finally won a game in the championship.
Yeah, the cheering.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I'm absolutely wrapped.
Yeah. Well, before we can talk about Aston Villa later on.
We'll talk about Aston Villa, but yeah, I think my stance is Dangerfield starting in the midfield.
He starts in the midfield, right. Yeah. Well, I mean, the other thing as well, we have Rory Sloan, who hasn't played a game of football in a month, essentially. Because, of course, they've had the bye this week. He was out for the first final, and they had the bye the week before.
What would make it difficult?
He might be a little rusty, old Rory, perhaps.
I don't think... he might be a bit rusty early on, but he'll be fine throughout the game. What will really determine whether he plays a poor game or not is whether Scott Selwood tags him from the ball up. Yeah. And I think Geelong should do it. And but like you talk about, where it will be won, and I think if the midfield, if the Crows midfield can just get it in that forward line that we've been raving about for the last couple of years, Walker, Jenkins, Betts, Lynch, and the players that Hardingham's the other defender, Andy Otten if he plays,
he might come back in.
No, he kicked a few goals during the year, and Charlie Cameron. Runs through the midfield. I mean, the Adelaide Crows have got such depth in their forward line, and
it's just that name that we're missing there is Mitch McGovern, who is the big question mark because he looks like he might be out for the preliminary final,
possibly.
And of course, he's been quite good in the past couple of weeks. He was very, very good in the last final. He scored that goal to draw the game against Collingwood at the end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's been in quite good form, so that would be a big out for Adelaide. He provides a real target for them. Of course, they've got such depth in their forward line that they can spread the load and probably be okay. But it's just another one of those things, Finals is a game of small percentages and little things that go against you. Absolutely. Mitch McGovern being out, that's the sort of thing that can win or lose you a game. So,
but we are looking for I'm actually looking forward to this game in particular. I think this will be the best game of the prelims, and everything will be on the line for both sides, and it will be on early. It will be on for young and old. But Brodie, encapsulating all that, your 2 tips.
Yes, the 2 tips. Well, Richmond versus GWS first. I mean, GWS was so good last week, but I really want to believe Melbourne hometown crowd, 95,000 Rabbit fans, 1982, so what's that? About 35 long years of pain and heartbreak since Richmond last made the grand final. I think they will get up. And get up by a few goals against GWS. So I
think Richmond will win. I hope Richmond win and go on to win the grand final just for my prediction's sake. I made a big call.
You did make a big call.
And I hope it goes on. Yeah, really well. And I would tip Richmond by maybe a couple of goals. It could threaten to be like the like the Richmond Geelong game where it just broke open late, and I think that's how it will play out. Adelaide and Geelong.
Adelaide Geelong, I'm going to go with Adelaide. I think they've been too good all year. They've been the best side in the competition by a long way, and I don't think that's going to change for this game. I think they're going to come out and I think they're going to win pretty convincingly. I'm going to go Adelaide by 5 goals.
I'm going to say Adelaide, either side can win, and the margin will be 1 point.
1 point.
Such drama. A script writer has written that. Now,
we'll talk a little bit more about AFL before we move on. We'll just touch on a couple of things. Lots of off-season movings happening in the past week. The big one came out smack bag in the middle of the night. Is that Ken Hinkley looks certain to take the job at the Gold Coast Suns.
That's very interesting because obviously Stuart Dew, who I reckon, I don't know what... Gee, I tell you what, Stuart Dew, I mean, he's almost a guy you'd have as a senior coach, and he's pulled out. It does say something, and, you know, whatever you read into it, there's something might have happened since then, but it does seem likely that Ken Hinkley... Yep. Because, again, and we talked about this last week, and I gave him a little clip to David Koch, but obviously there's been a fallout between Koch and Ken Hinkley, and also another rumour that's been flying around in terms of another breakdown in a relationship is between the Western Bulldogs coach Luke Beveridge and the package, Jake Stringer.
Jake Stringer looks to be on the move as well. Just before we move on to Jake Stringer, we'll talk about Ken Hinkley. Do you think that David Koch has something really to answer for here? Because Ken Hinkley is a good coach. Admittedly a bit of a one-trick pony, but he's turned Port Adelaide from a pretty bottom side. He's brought in a lot of really good young players. You know, your Chad Wingards.
You do know the AFL had a hand in that. It's the same thing. The same thing's happened with Melbourne.
But I just don't understand from Ken Hinkley's point of view, why would you take this job? I mean, he must have had a real falling out with David Koch because he's invested so much time and effort into Port Adelaide and building this side he's got now. And in the next 2 or 3 seasons, they can look to win a premiership. Why is he taking a job at Gold Coast and starting all over again and leaving his work for someone else to reap the rewards from? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, first of all,
it doesn't make any sense.
Obviously, I think it does make sense, and it makes sense for this reason. And that's because the AFL wants to improve the Gold Coast Suns. Obviously, they've sent Mark Evans over there. Mark Evans wants the best available option, and they think, and because of the Port Adelaide connections, they think that Ken Hinkley is their man. And I personally would have thought, and this is when Melbourne was going after, the successor to Paul Roos. You know, we went after Stuart Dew, but then we got Simon Goodwin. I mean, hey, it's working. But, you know, David Koch wasn't, the AFL got David Koch to be president. Right. You know, they appointed all these people, and Peter, the AFL set a blueprint for Port Adelaide, and they've done the same thing at Melbourne, and it seems to be working. So, what they'll be trying to do is do the same at the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast need to rebrand. So, but having said all of that, that's about what the Gold Coast need to do.
There's obviously from Ken Hinkley's point of view, like he would want to move.
Well, it's probably been in Ken Hinkley's interests to move, particularly if there has been a falling out. And I think, and like we've said last week, and what I've said is that this outside nonsense and language from Kochie is unhelpful. Yeah, and this is not the first time. Last year we had this problem when Port Adelaide were playing poor football. You had Kochie saying some of these outlandish things. I think people need to temper it a bit. It would be interesting to see how things played out. Obviously, I don't think there will be a major announcement. There could be a major announcement during the week. It'd be a big story, but
yeah, I'm not sure.
Because obviously, the Gold Coast and Port Adelaide will need to formulate their plans before they start going to the off season and start making significant list changes. It's going to be very interesting. My instinct...
If I was a Port Adelaide fan, I'd be wanting Ken Hinkley at the club over David Koch, if you had to make a choice between one of the two of them. And I know the president obviously has such a widespread influence over everyone at the club, but Ken Hinkley's got them playing a good brand of football again after a couple of so-so years. I mean, as a Port Adelaide fan, I'd be really disappointed this has happened, because I think Ken Hinkley is a good coach.
Well, I don't think Port Adelaide have played I didn't think they had a particularly bad season.
No, not at all.
The only issue that Port Adelaide had was they didn't beat enough top 8 teams.
And they were very unlucky to lose against West Coast. They were very unlucky to lose.
Do you think it'd be interesting? I'll pose a question to you, Brody. Would it be it's not a good situation for Hinkley to go. But having said that, if Hinkley does go, and someone of the calibre of Stuart Dew, who does have existing Port Adelaide connections, would it make sense for Port Adelaide to say, okay, we don't like this, but this is a situation that can work for us. Ken Hinkley goes to the Gold Coast, and we go after Stuart Dew, or go up after the next best. What would you think? Do you think that would be?
I mean, look, I think that if Ken Hinkley's going to go, Stuart Dew is a very, 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 very capable replacement. I mean, it's never ideal when your head coach leaves you, as opposed to you leaving them. You know, it's kind of think back to St Kilda when Ross Lyon left them, leaving them all in a daze. You know, it's never ideal when the coach leaves the club.
Yeah.
So I think that given the situation they're in which Hinkley looks 99% certain to go, I think that Stuart Dew is their man. I mean, every time a senior coaching position's been up in the air, he's been the first name on the list, and I think it's about time.
Yeah,
it's been
about
highly revered amongst the coaching circles for a long time, and I think it's about time that he... And I think it's good for Stuart Dew as well, because what he does is he walks into a club with a list that's ready to contend for a top 4 position. He's not going to have to build a club from the ground up like Ken Hinkley would have to do with the Gold Coast, or like Chris Fagan's doing at Brisbane at the moment.
Yeah.
He's not going to have to start from scratch.
Yeah, exactly.
He's got a list that's ready to win, and I think it's a good result for him,
I think
I think it's a good result for Port Adelaide if they can get him.
Yeah, I think so too. And again, this situation is... this situation's not good, and it needs to. They just need. I think they just need to just chill out for a bit. Let the rest of the season finish. Let whoever win the premiership, and then start. Because sometimes in this industry, it's moving so fast. You just need to find opportunities to take a bit of a break. But we'll go back to the Jakey Stringer. Obviously, the fallout.
Ken Hinkley on the move, and Jake Stringer as well.
Geelong is the side.
You're liking the look of Geelong, you think?
Well, I think from what Damien Barrett said on Triple M,
they could do with some more forward firepower. I can see that move working out.
Yeah, well, but the thing is, like, I mean, I think if they're interested in
that's
Geelong,
a lazy forward line though. Stringer and Menzel.
I don't think Menzel's.
There's not a lot of work right there.
I don't think Menzel's particularly lazy.
He's just not a huge pressure forward.
Well, he may not be. Well, if he's not I mean, that's something he can add to his game. But Menzel's, I take Menzel kicking. Menzel's kicking for someone who's done his
he's a good shot for goal, but it's just the...
Oh, it's not even just the shot for goal, like the run. That's things you can
happening.
You can work on. But I mean, it's going to be interesting what the makeup is. Obviously, Stringer will his preferred club, as it looks, is Geelong. You think about Geelong. I mean, if they are going to land Ablett as well, I mean... Wow, jeez. They're going to have to get rid of someone. I think Watlop's going to be the one that's going to be going, but anyway.
Well, and draft picks as well. And I don't know if that's in Geelong's best interest, in all honesty. The other club that's been talked about, and I could add my 2 cents on this, is the Bombers for Jake Stringer. Now, if I am John Worsfold, and if I am Adrian Dodoro, if I'm the fellows and blokes heading up the Essendon recruiting department, and Jake Stringer comes knocking on my door saying I'm ready to play for Essendon, I would turn him away and say no, which I know sounds quite strange, because he is a great forward. He played a really good year a couple of years ago. He's had a couple of lacklustre years, but he's clearly very talented. I would have thought
anyone would have wanted to negotiate with Essendon.
Here's the thing. Well, hey now, let's be nice. But with...
They're negotiating... Anyway.
We are a bit greedy, but that's all right. They're going to be expecting a first-round draft pick for Jake Stringer. And if I have a look at the entirety of Essendon's side, we need an inside midfielder, and we need a tall defender. There's plenty of other areas on the ground that we can improve before we go looking for a mid-sized forward. Because if you have a look at our forward line, we've got Joe Danaher, obviously had a career best year. I think that everyone can see how talented he is. Yep. Chipping Woody, of course, playing well. Orazio Fantasia. Hooker's had a good year up forward. You had Josh Begley came to the side late as a mid-sized forward who played really well, especially in his debut game. Kicked 2 goals from his first 2 kicks or something like that. I think that the forward line is the area on the ground where Essendon require the least amount of investment and improvement. And putting a first-round draft pick into a mid-sized forward from the Western Bulldogs would be irresponsible to me.
Well, I think
I hope it doesn't happen. But
and I think there's also a bit of excess baggage with Stringer. I think
Stringer he's clearly had a very bad year.
No, but Stringer has a lot of stuff outside football.
Yeah.
It's the question you ask. It's the same question when Richmond asked when offloading Dustin Martin the first time, when they were happy to get rid of him and try and get some value. He was almost going to Melbourne, but I think I think Stringer will go. I don't think Essendon would want him. I would agree with you on that front, but whoever takes on Stringer is taking on a big ask, and again goes back to the question: are you willing to invest a first round pick, or find a like, or as maybe a later pick and a player? Who can Essendon offer to the Bulldogs that the Bulldogs are interested in? The Bulldogs are interested in key position players. They've got too many running midfields, and
Essendon don't have a lot to give in terms of that, and I don't think Geelong do either necessarily. So I can't see them necessarily finding a good keeper unless they want Wiley Buzzer, I suppose. But
Wiley Buzzer has it. He's come around this year.
I can't.
Geelong.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen with the Jake Stringer situation. I don't think it's got an easy answer, but it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
Another couple of players on the move, not to a club, but to the sad world of unemployment. I wanted to get your take on this.
Oh.
It's Jake Spencer and Jack Trengove especially.
Well,
what do you make of this?
Well, it is quite sad.
It's just a real hard luck story, isn't it? Trengove?
Yeah, it is a real hard luck story.
It's one of those football stories.
Yeah, and obviously now in that draft year for Melbourne, the only player left in that draft year is Max Gawn, and I don't want to avoid. A lot's been said about this. I'm very disappointed for them, but this is the reality of the business and the caper. Yeah. But I am particularly, I'll give my whack, and we had our worst of the year, or the worst of all time in the last 7 days. But, I mean, for the worst of arguably all time for this football club, Mark Neild, who's now an assistant coach at Essendon, has ruined the careers of Jack Grimes and Jack Trengove. And David Swartz on SEN said this, and I 100% agree with him, because you've put all this pressure on him. And, you saw him in his draft, his first couple of years with Tom Scully as well.
He was an excellent player.
That was the future. And, at the time, you could be reasonable to believe what Michael Voss said, that Melbourne would be the next powerhouse.
They're a club to build a team around.
Absolutely.
So they were players to build a team around Trengove and Scully.
But the thing that, that period was such a dark period. And, Jack Trengove is a great guy, and he's had such bad luck.
Just the injuries, and injuries.
And absolutely.
Real
and Jake Spencer was there in Bailey's first year, Dean Bailey's first year, the departed Dean Bailey.
Has he been around that long, Jake Spencer?
Yeah, he made his debut then. But I feel so sad for Spencer, because I thought there was a role for him this year in the team. I actually believe that we should have played Toe Ruckman.
No.
Because, one of the questions that was asked in the preseason, he was in scintillating preseason form, was could he be that other forward that could kick a couple of goals? And he demonstrated that, so I didn't know why they went. And obviously we had a dependence on Max, and then Max did his knee. And, okay, while Max was out, Melbourne still won games, and we relied on Cam Pedersen, Jack Watson. But I mean, if I were a circling AFL club, I would get value for money by taking Jake Spencer, because he's actually underrated. He's incredibly strong, and he's actually a mobile ruckman. And I know I'd be interested to see what Melbourne replaces. Also, if I can just say about Melbourne and pre-seasons, if whoever is peddling the absolute nonsense that Christian Salem is on the trade table, they need to cut that crap.
I've not heard this.
Oh, someone's been peddling, and
I'll take him.
And the thing is, I've been hearing this from questionable sources, so I do question those sources. But I don't think Christian Salem should be on the table. We got him at pick 9, first round pick, top 10 pick, essentially for Josh Kelly and with Dom Tyson. Stop it. Stop peddling those rumours. He is not on the trade table. He's arguably our best disposal by foot. That's all I'll say about that. But
all right, there you go. You've heard it here.
Yeah, stop peddling it.
Put the boots in.
I will. Otherwise, I'll go after you. But
that's just about it. I think for the world of AFL this week. We've spent a little bit of time on it.
We spent a fair bit of time.
That's all right. We'll cut 5 minutes off at the start. But that's all right.
That's okay.
We'll move on to the world of round ball football.
Round ball.
A good week for the Australian women's team, playing tomorrow night as well. But they've played the Brazilian national side and sold out a stadium.
Yeah.
And won. That's really great to see from the Matildas. They've had such a fantastic year. I mean, did you see Lisa Devana's goal from outside the box?
That was crazy. Who was Robert Side? Who was the commentator?
I don't know, but they lost their mind, and they called it early as well. They called it real early. As soon as that ball left the boot, they were up out of their chair screaming. They knew it was going straight in the back of the net. Really great to see the Matildas doing so well. I mean, putting the men's team to shame, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
15,000 people in for a women's match, all paid attendance is pretty impressive. So, really enjoyable to watch that. In regards to men's football as well, we've had a very big week. The Champions League up and running. Did you see Barcelona's performance against Juventus?
To be honest, I didn't see it. You'll have to fill me in.
So,
Brody.
Barcelona...
Brody watches... The only side I am interested in, of course, is...
Aston Villa didn't turn out for the Champions League this season.
Yeah, are we talking about the... Oh, we're talking about the Champions League. I thought we were talking about the Championship.
No, not quite.
Well, you're wearing a QPR shirt. Sorry
for
those ever. But anyway, yes, no, tell us a bit more about
Barcelona came out and they smashed Juventus 3-0. Some real question marks around Juve this year. They've had not an excellent off-season, it's fair to say.
They've been terrible since they rebranded.
They lost... Well, that logo is horrendous.
It's
what a horrible logo. Are they a Jeep? Is that what are they Jeep now?
That's a question for the viewers and listeners at home.
Just completely despicable.
Absolute rubbish.
They lost Bonucci. They're one of their biggest rivals than AC Milan. They've had a pretty horrible off-season. They come out and they lose 3-0 to a Barcelona who everyone is expecting to be not as good as they were last year. Obviously, with the loss of Neymar and Ousmane Dembele now being out for 4 months, their new big signing, they completely dominated them. And it was quite strange to see Juventus going from Champions League finalists last year, and it's very early, I know, to put the nail in the coffin and say they're done and dusted, but it's not looking overly promising.
No, particularly not early on. And with any campaign, you need to get off to a really good start. And I mean, if you have a draw and but it's still playing good football, I mean that's the main thing. But I think this is some things go, but it's up to Juve to turn that around, and they have to get things right, go try and find some form domestically and bring that back. But obviously they've got to manage a few players. They've got to manage their squad.
They've got some real star power up forward. I mean, if you have a look at their attack, I'd argue their attack maybe... I would argue their attack might be one of the best in the world, if not the best, which I know is a big claim, but Gonzalo Higuain and Dybala are both very talented players. They're probably not quite up there with, Cavani, Mbappe and Neymar, or
or Suarez and
Messi at the moment, or Benzema and Ronaldo and Isco or Bale, depending on who's playing. But that's a real strong striker partnership.
He'll be gone in January, I reckon.
Bale?
Yep.
That's fair call. I can get behind that. Who to? Aston Villa. Anyway, moving on to the Premier League.
Someone's running world football like manager mode. Jeez,
onto the Premier League as well.
Premier League.
Because I wanted to talk about the Premier League, because Manchester City also scored 4 goals in the Champions League. They scored 5 goals against Liverpool.
Jeez, wow.
In case I hadn't told you. And then they came out against Watford and scored 6. What the hell are we going to do to stop a side from Manchester winning the Premier League this season?
Well, that is incredible. What's that, like 17 goals in 3 games?
Yeah, from the Premier League, I know the Premier League for sure. It's 11 goals in 2 games.
But like even
with no goals conceded.
That's 3 consecutive games, 17, 18 goals. That's
rampant. Sergio Aguero scoring a hat-trick as well.
Manchester, it could we go back to like was Sir Alex Ferguson's final year when was it Manchester contending for the
you mean the Sergio Aguero last-minute goal against Queen's Park Rangers year? I believe that wasn't Ferguson's last year. I believe that may have been the year before.
It might have been. It was around that time, but like that, I reckon it could shape up to that.
Well, at the moment, both sides are equal on points. They're equals on goal difference, and they're equals on goals scored. So things are very, very close between the two Manchester sides. It'll be interesting to see how they match up this year, because of course, Man City go and score 6 against Watford. Manchester United say, "Oh yeah, we can give that a crack." They come out and they score 4 goals against Everton. Man, both sides are looking real terrifying this season. A good stat here as well.
Oh, here we go. We like stats.
I like my stats.
Absolutely.
So, 5 games into the season, Jose Mourinho's men has a goal difference of plus 14. That is the exact same as Louis van Gaal's goal difference after the completion of his final season as manager, achieved 33 games later.
Wow.
So after 5 games.
So that means if Manchester start spectacularly carking it now, it will be a spectacular fall from grace. It'll be interesting.
If every single one of their matches from now until the end of the year ends 0-0, they will have the same goal difference as in Louis van Gaal's final season as manager. I like that stat.
I feel sorry
that
for
quite a
What's
nice
Louis
one?
up to? I wonder, where are they now? We should do that. We should start up that segment.
Where
are they now? Sports podcast.
Might get a tap on the shoulder. See Louis Van Gaal in the A-League next season, maybe, perhaps. If Kevin Muskie gets the nod for the Australia job. Come on, Melbourne Victory. Louis
Van Gaal for the Socceroos job.
Oh, yeah. Well, we've had a Dutch manager before in Gus Hiddink, who was quite fantastic at the 2006 World Cup.
Wasn't Pim also Dutch?
Yes, but the less said about Pim Verbeek, the better. Anyway,
I thought we did quite well in South Africa.
Before we move on from football,
Dutch people hate Australians, I think.
Wow, that's a pretty harsh call.
Ever since that, they hated us ever since that World Cup. Since Timmy Cahill scored that magnificent goal.
That's a stunning goal. That's one of the best goals of all time. That
it is.
Anyway, before we move on from football, I do want to touch on another side in the Premier League in Crystal Palace.
Oh dear.
I said last week that Frank de Boer would likely be the next manager to go. I believe later that day he was out the door and Roy Hodgson was brought in.
So
how do you sack a manager after 4 games? That's despicable, isn't it?
Yeah, and also
imagine if Sydney had sacked John Longmire at the start of the year after going 0-4. Isn't that shocking?
Yeah.
I do want to run you through some...
Palace are destined for the championship. They've had their run in the Premier League. I think they're going down.
I'm going to run you through some Frank de Boer stats for his final match as manager. They notched 23 shots without scoring in their 1-0 loss to Burnley. Their men fell behind after an early goal to Chris Wood, who became the first ever New Zealander to score a goal on his starting debut. Frank de Boer's side became the first top division team to lose their first 4 games and not score a goal since Preston in 1924-25. Since then, they've now become the first side to lose first 5 games in history. Frank de Boer became the first permanent manager in Premier League to be dismissed without seeing his side score a goal. His 4 matches in charge of Crystal Palace are the shortest tenure in Premier League history.
Oh, jeez.
He was dismissed after just 77 days as manager, which is remarkably shorter than his previous stint at Inter Milan, in which he was let go after 85 days. Frank de Boer is having an absolutely horrid time as manager.
He's having a mare.
And Crystal Palace is really, in my opinion, I just don't understand how you can't back your manager after more than 4 games. It's despicable, isn't it?
It's terrible. You don't allow his squad to gel, form together.
Roy Hodgson is an uninspired signing. He's 70 years old. His tactics are outdated. He was horrible at Liverpool. He was no good for the England national team. The only side he's ever achieved success at is Fulham over a couple of years, and that's it.
Fulham.
That is a poor managerial appointment, and there's big problems at Crystal Palace, and they're going down.
I tell you what, they are going down. But it's just so sad that in any of the games, you're the first Premier League manager to be dismissed when your side hasn't even scored a goal. That is so
That's bad,
sad.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it underpins. And, I think it takes take note to anybody looking to sign this bloke. Don't sign him. Don't make him a manager of a top club. Make him a coach of one of your academy sides or something, because he's just clearly not up to top flight football.
No. It's a tough one. It really is a tough one. So rest easy, Frank de Boer. You will be missed. It was nice knowing you while it lasted. We'll move on from football. Did you want to quickly touch on cricket? Maybe just a quick couple of minutes.
Yes,
Tell me what's going to happen.
Well, not much.
Australia
Well,
and International.
not much happened. The first ODI between Australia and India took place last night, and it was pretty uninspiring. I mean, Australia did get off to a really good start. Actually, we should start with the result first. India won by 26 runs in a Duckworth-Lewis system.
I don't think there's 2 words I hate more in sport than Duckworth-Lewis.
Oh, dear.
It's a bad time.
It's a bad time.
Sad.
But it was really good for the Aussies early. I should probably get the app up. But I do know that they got the wickets early. They got the prize wicket of Virat Kohli. Right. Got him out for a duck,
nice.
Thanks to some
Excellent.
good bowling from Nathan Coulter-Nile, who took, I think, 3 or 4 wickets, and a great catch from Glenn Maxwell as well. It was really good early on. I think India were at one stage 5 for 118, but then MS Dhoni came to the crease. He provided a superb knock of about 79, and India. And the Australian innings, in terms of the run chase, they just couldn't get going. Australia 9 for 137 after 21 overs. Just having a look at the scorecard here. David Warner made 25. Hilton Cartwright opening the batting made 1. Stephen Smith made 1. Travis Head made 5. Stoinis made 3. Matthew Wade made 9. And Cummins made 9. Nathan Coulter-Nile made 2. And Zampa was not out on 5, but
That's
James
one of the
Faulkner,
worst middle order performances I think I've ever heard of.
well, ever since South Africa.
So is this a multi-game series, or is it just an old?
Oh yeah, I think
one
we're playing.
and done?
I think we're playing a few. So this is the ODI and T20 series that usually you would play after the Test series, but obviously the way that international and domestic cricket with T20 is now, you have to have, tournaments. In different parts, you have to have your ODI tournaments, and I don't like that. But hey, what can
we
you
look
do?
forward to the Ashes?
But we are looking forward to the Ashes. But Australia, not much to say. Other than Nathan Coulter-Nile played really well. James Faulkner wasn't good with the ball, but third top scorer with 32 with the bat. So we're looking forward to some cricket. Obviously, Australia will be looking to improve for the next ODI, a couple more ODIs before some T20s, and then I think it's the Ashes preparation after that. So that will be very interesting. Now,
I think
we're about to go move on. We'll move on from cricket because there's nothing else to report in terms of international cricket. I mean, the other highlight was obviously there's T20 cricket between England and West Indies. I think England won that, but there was another big story, a big event that happened on Sunday, yesterday, and it was a boxing match that I don't know about it, but what I do know, and I did listen to this on the radio, and I did read the articles, that this is arguably one of the most controversial results in boxing. Brody, tell us.
I'm going to merge a couple segments here for the purpose of speeding the process up a little bit and talking about it at the same time, because I'm going to pick my worst of all time of the last 7 days. And I've decided to go with a lady by the name of Adelaide Bird.
Adelaide Bird?
Adelaide Bird, who is not a household name, has decided to exercise her right as a boxing judge to be free as a bird and judge this contest 118-110 against Gennady Golovkin. Now, this fight was won pretty convincingly, most people thought, by Golovkin, by Triple G. And I think this is a real problem in boxing, the whole judging process, because you've seen a lot of matches in recent times. Obviously, the Jeff Horn fight in Brisbane was quite controversial for its judging decisions as well. Manny Pacquiao's come under... had a lot of really...
And also,
really
might I say, even though the result was
him.
decisive, the judging from the McGregor-Mayweather fight, that was actually some interesting...
I think that just with this fight, she had judged the contest not just to be a win for Canelo,
but a decisive
win, which is completely... I think the opinion of most people.
So you watched the
ludicrous.
fight.
I've seen little bits and pieces of the fight. I haven't watched the whole thing.
So from what you saw, and what people are saying, you're saying that who should have won the fight?
Gennady Golovkin should have won the fight, and it was a draw. But it was just that it could have been argued potentially either way, but she made it such a decisive victory for Canelo. And I think that Gennady Golovkin was, coming forward for a lot of the fight. He was eating a lot of shots on the chin, but he was returning them. He showed a real great chin. I think I've picked her as my worst of all time with the last 7 days.
Wow.
Living up to her Adelaide name, she may actually be worse than the city itself.
Oh, geez, the city of
Can you imagine boxing judging in something like the AFL if they were to judge victories not on the amount of goals scored, but instead on the amount of time spent zonally defending or something like that?
Well, the thing is, I don't understand.
Boxing judging is a real problem.
It's not only, but why do they only have 3 judges? Surely that is too... that's not decisive enough. I think you need more judges.
Yeah, well, I'm not entirely sure of more judges. Particularly for competent judges. I'd be happy with 3 judges.
But hang on. You're saying that that if it was 2-1, you're basically saying that one judge can determine the result. I don't think that's great. I think you need at least
one judge hasn't determined the result of this contest.
It was unanimous, but the principle.
It was a draw because we had one judge judge it for Golovkin, one judge for Canelo, and the other judge judged it a draw, so it became a draw.
So the fight was a draw?
The fight was a draw. If 2 judges had judged it for Canelo, it would have been a split decision victory.
But having said that, if you had more judges, then you would have a greater and broader understanding of a result.
You could argue it, but I don't think the problem is bringing in more judges. I think that's just going to potentially clutter the process. I think what you really just have to do is bring in
5 judges. Have the best of 3.
Let's just have it
like a jury or something.
Done by a fan vote. They can text in their results.
Fan vote. If you had that principle, McGregor would have won the fight. And in this case, I don't understand that because again, there's so much doubt. There's so many outliers by having just let alone 3. That's just too vague. I think you have to have a greater pool of input. Because for example, if you had another few judges, you would understand how they saw it. And you saw, like, for example, if another two judges voted like the other two judges instead of Adelaide, then you could say that Adelaide voted poorly and that she needs to never referee or umpire,
never judge
a competition. Brody,
she has been suspended, but I think
suspended from this fight.
She's been suspended for judging title fights for the interim. I think it's just to wait till the dust settles a little bit. But then you have the problem, if you bring in more judges, they may do the exact same thing. They may just judge the fight incorrectly again. You can't. Can't trust them.
But that's undermining the authority.
You have to undermine.
You can't undermine the authority. You have to give faith.
I'm undermining the authority right now.
This is the same thing that the AFL is having a problem. We can go back all about and how and I made the point about the DRS in cricket. I mean, I saw some reviews last night that was so shocking. If you start undermining the umpires and the judges and the referees and the officials, the match officials, to do their job, then they don't have any confidence. If you gave them an opportunity to have some confidence and gave them an opportunity where they had clear in their mind what they're looking for and the criteria, I just think there's too much human error or human factors that you have to factor in terms of judging.
I completely understand that, and I understand why you wouldn't want to just completely go out and bash every single judge there is, because it would be a shot on their confidence and affect their ability to judge fights. But at the same time, they have been getting this. But there has to be a sense of accountability.
There has to be a sense of accountability,
and I think that it's time to hold them accountable for pretty horrible judging.
And I think, and overall, that just demonstrates the discrepancy. Was it 110 to
118 to 110, which is a real decisive.
Wait, so
118 to 110, which is about 8 rounds won in favour of Canelo Alvarez, which I think most people would definitely disagree with. But anyway, we'll move on. The draw would set up a rematch, and of course the fight was very well received. A lot of people quite enjoyed it very much, so a rematch is going to do quite well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, moving on. I think we should, to finish things off, I think we should finish off with our greatest of all time in the last 7 days and finish things on a positive note.
Positive note, yeah.
Matthew,
I think it's been
who
positive.
has caught your eyes?
Nary Warrens of Good Venture. I've been very positive.
Who's caught your eye as the greatest of all time of the last 7 days?
Well, who has been the greatest? Oh, I was going to say the Matildas.
You're going to go the Matildas?
I will actually. Well, I would. I'm just coming up with. I actually don't know. I didn't prepare for this, I must say.
We can refine things. We're going to go with Elisa Devana for an outstanding goal, or maybe the Sam Kerr as well. With
Sam Kerr. Oh, yeah, that
fantastic.
was good.
She's a real
the finish.
Superstar, young lady.
I think I would actually. Yeah, I would say the Matildas, and I would say. I don't think that. Well, actually, I will say it. The FFA, what they've managed to do by having a sellout for this, what they've done for women's football this year, and it has been very, very, very positive. And I think women's football in this country is doing a lot better. I mean, compared to other places like Denmark, where the federation, the football federation in Denmark, is having a pay dispute with the Danish women's footballers, and there's an active charity from their male counterparts, basically donating their match fees to the women's side. So Matilda's football is going really well. I think there's a lot that can be learned, and that is why they're my greatest for the last 7 days. Also,
it's really been up against the wall, women's football. I mean, if you have a look at the last president of FIFA, Sepp Blatter, who said the key to popularising women's football was to have them wear shorter shorts. I mean, they've been really, well, no, exactly right. You should raise your eyebrows at it, because it's a pretty pathetic thing to say from the head of one of the biggest governing bodies
everyone knows that before that Sepp Blatter's credibility was undermined when he gave the World Cup to Qatar. Qatar, I tell you.
They've come out, and the Women's World Cup was a great success. The Matildas are playing really well.
They're in the top 10, aren't they?
Yeah, and
that's one of our best.
They're going to be considered one of the contenders to win the whole World Cup in 2019 if they can keep this form up. Imagine
if the women's side win the World Cup. That'll be our crown jewel team.
I'll be supporting them.
I will say this quickly, an opportunity, a shout out. I want to give also an honourable mention for the greatest of the last 7 days for those who participated in the 2017 Connors Run. It was a very good event. There were a lot of people there. Hughesy was there, a few other stars, a lot of famous faces, but over $700,000 raised. for childhood cancer and for pediatric cancer, and also that was actually $100,000 over their goal. So their aim was to raise $600,000, and they smashed that. So another successful Connors run, and every Connors run is run on a very sunny, shiny day. So just a shout out to Kate, who looked after me in the run. Could have run it and come back and then run it again, but anyway, she's done a real job. But well done to everyone that did Connors run. I'll just get that in quickly.
No, that's very good, and well done to you for doing it, because I imagine your legs are probably quite sore.
Yeah, they're very sore.
This morning.
People, the viewers can see me just sort of
wincing. Every moment of your existence is pain.
Yeah, there's pain at the moment.
My greatest,
and that's just not from being a Melbourne supporter. But anyway, there's my drive fight.
I'm gonna hit a little bit of a somber note for my greatest of all time in the last 7 days. I would like to call my goat of the last week, Bobby the Brain Heenan, who was a professional wrestling manager from the olden days, who unfortunately did pass away this morning, which was quite sad news. But if we have a look in the world, we were at the wrestling, of course.
Oh, that was fantastic.
Earlier in the week. Good fun. The world of professional wrestling managers is an art that's been lost, but Bobby the Brain Heenan was one of the greatest of all time to ever do it, accompanied Andre the Giant to the ring for WrestleMania 3. One of the best of all time on commentary, real gift of gab. So it was quite sad to see this morning that unfortunately he has passed away. So I'm going to give my greatest of all time and pay respects to the great man Bobby the Brain Heenan, who was a hero to me. So
that's fantastic. No, it's really good.
Take care of the brain.
It's really sad when icons of any industry and any sport pass on, but it's their legacy that makes us greater and moves.
One of the best of all time, and there is no arguing that. Have you got anything else that you would like to add?
Oh, the wrestling was fun.
You had a good time with the wrestling this week.
The wrestling was good. Actually, before we get on to the wrestling, I just want to say that Mark Leishman won some golf tournament.
We got some Australian successes.
Australians
a hole in one as well
from Jason Day. But going into the final round, I've got to. I should have checked. I was listening to on the radio ABC with Jared Rately and John Fain this morning. Going to the final round, 5 shots under. That's impressive, and he ended up winning 23 under. That's fantastic.
What a man!
That's
a hero.
That's like kicking 20 goals in a game of footy. That's just fantastic. So, well done to him. But the wrestling was fantastic.
I had a great time at the wrestling.
I had a great time, particularly because my boy Roman Reigns.
Yeah,
beated your man.
Unfortunately, my top fellows, Braun Strowman and The Miz, were not to be successful, but that is okay. We've moved on. We're better now. But it was a good, wholesome, fun night.
What was your favourite moment from the? What was your favourite moment?
I think I most enjoyed seeing Kurt Angle for the first time.
Oh yes,
I had a good time. I'm a big Kurt Angle fan.
Returned for the first time to Australia in 10 years. Over a decade.
He's gone through a lot of hardships in his life over the past decade, Kurt Angle, but he's clean and he's better, and it's good to see him back on Australian soil. I love that man.
Fantastic.
He's a hero.
Agree. I loved the tag team match between Sheamus and Cesaro and
the Hardy Boys.
I love both those.
Those are great teams, aren't they?
They're both great teams. And they're fantastic entertainers as well. And it was also good to see the hometown hero, Emma, return in the women's division, a fatal 5-way between...
Injured last year for the Australia Tour, which was a massive bummer. So it's great to see her back in action and competing in Melbourne again. It was very, very, very big reception for Emma as well.
Absolutely, and a few fans for Sasha Banks in there, and Alexa Bliss as well, Nia Jax.
Very popular, Alexa Bliss.
Nia Jax got a few boos.
Yeah, but
that's
okay.
I mean...
That is to be expected.
And of course,
a bad guy.
And of course, a legend of the women's division,
Mickey James.
Mickey James,
former women's champion.
I think she's a fan favourite.
She was a fan favourite.
I think everyone loves women's.
The women's
wrestling.
Match was quite excellent. I thought that was one of my matches of the night. But anyway, we had
a bit short. I would have liked to go the distance, but hey, that's how wrestling works sometimes.
It was a good night of wholesome family content.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had a good time. Anything else you've noticed this week in sports that you'd like to bring attention to? Or?
Quite interesting.
I
think we've covered it quite. It'd be just interesting to see how the finals week plays out. Obviously, silly season will intensify. The Melbourne Storm play the Brisbane Broncos at Amy Park. Obviously, had the week off. I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Good luck to them.
And obviously, the only Melbourne team that I'm pretty much interested in at this point in time. But they will. And Darius Boyd might make a return, their captain of the Brisbane Broncos.
Right.
So it will shape up to be a really big game. And I think the other match is that the Sydney Roosters play North Queensland. North Queensland, without Jonathan Thurston and 4 other of their key players, to basically go from 8th. They're Bradburying at the moment, but just hopefully not in the grand final against Melbourne Storm. But anyway, I'm looking forward to that sport.
One last thing before we, I want to also pay my respects to another fallen soldier from the week on the topic of North Queensland. The North Queensland Fury, you'll remember from the A-League, of course, who were kicked out of the league, have been playing in Queensland's divisions as the Northern Fury, have officially rebranded. So the North Queensland Fury, as we once knew and loved it, is officially dead, which I find quite saddening. I was a big fan of the Fury myself. So, rest in peace, North Queensland Fury. Gone but not forgotten. We'll always remember your horrible lime green kits, your wacky coaches.
But you did manage to get Robbie Fowler. There you go.
You done something right.
A Liverpool fan, happy to see a Liverpool great out
happy to see God out there on the pitch. But anyway, so our respects paid to the North Queensland Fury. You will be probably not missed by many, but at least by me.
Hey, anyway, we'll see how we go.
Regardless.
But
I think that'll just about do us.
That'll do it. Well, fantastic. We got the recording here, so you'll be able to see this on YouTube and listen to this on SoundCloud. And it's been a fantastic episode from Narre Warren South. Brody,
we'll see you all next week with a big week of finals. There'll be plenty to talk about again. There's never a moment to breathe, is there? There's always some craziness going on.
That's why we love sport.
I'm dreading the trade period. I'm dreading it. But anyway, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Thank you all for listening and for taking the time to watch. I hope you all have a lovely day. Thank you all very much.